It turns out, most of the facts you learned in geography class, and might still believe, are just straight up wrong. For example, did you know that most penguins actually live in a desert, or that there's a mountain taller than Mount Everest? Here are 50 facts about geography that almost everyone gets wrong. Number 50. The highest mountain in the world. Since the 1950s, 4,000 people have successfully scaled Mount Everest, and at least 300 more have died trying. As the world's tallest mountain, the so-called Jewel of the Himalayas is considered the final boss for mountaineers all over the world. But what if we told you that Everest isn't actually the tallest mountain on Earth? That honor actually goes to Mauna Kea, a dormant volcano in the Hawaiian Islands. Mauna Kea's height from base to tip is 33,500 feet, or just over 10,200 meters tall, which is almost 4,500 feet or 1,400 meters taller than Everest. The only reason this fact isn't more commonly recognized is that most of Mauna Kea's height is underwater. It's probably a little harder to climb a mountain when you have to start at the bottom of the ocean. Number 49. Despite being the highest point above sea level, Everest isn't the closest point on the Earth to outer space either. That honor actually goes to Mount Chimborazo, a volcano located in Ecuador in the Andes mountain range. While Earth is spherical, it isn't a perfect sphere, and it's a little bit wider around the middle than it is at the top or bottom. So, since Mount Chimborazo is basically right on the equator, its peak sticks out further into space than either Everest or Mauna Kea, without actually being taller than either. Just goes to show that size is relative. Number 48. This one might seem a little obvious to some of you, but we might as well get it out of the way early. Africa is a continent, not a country. It's one of the most culturally and geographically diverse continents on Earth. Africa is made up of 54 countries and is home to approximately 2,000 spoken languages. Number 47. What country's flag is the Union Jack? Did you say Great Britain? Most people do, but most people would be wrong. The Union Jack is the flag of the United Kingdom. Although plenty of people outside the UK use the words Great Britain and United Kingdom interchangeably, only United Kingdom is the correct name. Great Britain is actually the name of the island that the countries of Scotland, England, and Wales are located on, which makes sense because it's the biggest island in the British Isles archipelago. Number 46. Africa is thought of as a continent located mostly in the southern hemisphere, but that isn't quite true. Almost 2/3 of Africa lies above the equator, placing the majority of the continent in the northern hemisphere. This means that countries like Egypt, Algeria, Morocco, and even parts of Nigeria and Kenya are all situated north of the equator. Number 45. Speaking of really big things, the Great Wall of China, it's pretty big. This ancient fortification used to mark the northern border of Imperial China, and at 4,500 miles or 7,200 kilometers long, it's the only man-made object that can be seen from the moon. Or is it? Turns out it isn't, at least not most of the time. It's only visible from low orbit, in very specific lighting and weather conditions, since from space, the materials the wall was constructed from are hard to differentiate from the surrounding forests. This myth dates back to before people had even been to the moon. The claim was first made in a Ripley's Believe It or Not cartoon, all the way back in 1932. Number 44. The Statue of Liberty might be the most famous icon of New York City, but it's not actually located in New York at all. It's actually located on the New Jersey side of the Hudson River. Despite this, in 1987, the Supreme Court ruled to make the statue officially part of New York City. Number 43. Staying in America, you might think that Kansas City is in Kansas, right? Well, not exactly. Kansas City is located right on the border between the states of Kansas and Missouri, and is technically split into two cities, Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas. Number 42. What country do Dutch people come from? If you said the Netherlands, you're correct. If you said Holland, you're also correct, but not for the reason you might think. Holland isn't a country. It's actually a province within the country of the Netherlands, which is home to the country's biggest city, Amsterdam, and its seat of government, The Hague. Most Dutch people don't care when people mistakenly call the whole country Holland, but some, particularly from the west of the Netherlands, find it really annoying. So make sure you get it right next time you meet a Dutch person. Number 41. If you look at a map of the United States, you might think that Maine, located in the Northeast, is the easternmost state in the country. But that technically isn't true. Due to the fact that the Earth is round, the honor actually goes to Amatignac Island, located in the Aleutian Islands of Alaska. Amatignac Island is located in the Bering Sea, between the US and Russia. It falls over the 180th meridian, which is the line that divides the eastern and western hemispheres. This means the island is so far west, it's looped back around to being east again. Number 40. It's pretty well known by now that Iceland is green and Greenland is covered in ice. It's often been repeated that the Vikings named the islands that way to keep other people from settling on the one that had the better soil for farming. Well, as a matter of fact, that's a myth. And the reason Iceland is named Iceland is because of its icy fjords. However, according to the Viking sagas, Greenland was actually named Greenland to make it sound more appealing to settlers after it was colonized by Eric the Red in the Middle Ages. Number 39. When you think about Australian cities, you probably picture Sydney's iconic Opera House and Harbour Bridge. Since it's such an iconic city, it'd be easy to make the assumption that it's the nation's capital, but you'd be mistaken. While Sydney is the most populous city in the country, the actual capital is Canberra, located a few hours south of Sydney in the Australian Capital Territory. The city was made the capital in 1913, after years of dispute over whether Australia's capital should be Sydney or Melbourne. Canberra was a compromise, as it's roughly halfway between the two larger cities. Number 38. Speaking of capitals, most people think that Lagos is the capital of Nigeria. This was true up until 1991, when the Nigerian government decided to move it to the smaller city of Abuja in the center of the country. Lagos is still the largest city in Nigeria, though, with an estimated population of over 21 million, as it's also the most populous city in Africa. This is probably why many people around the world still think of it as the nation's capital. Number 37. Toronto isn't the capital of Canada either. That would actually be Ottawa, another city in the province of Ontario. Ottawa is home to Canada's Parliament, its Supreme Court, and the home of the Prime Minister. It's also home to a large number of universities and has the highest proportion of university-educated residents of any Canadian city. Number 36. Many people think that Cape Town is the capital of South Africa, and that would be wrong. And it isn't Johannesburg either. South Africa actually has two capital cities, as a matter of fact. The administrative capital is located in Pretoria, while the judicial capital is in a city called Bloemfontein. Number 35. Still on the subject of capitals, Geneva isn't the capital of Switzerland, and neither is Zurich. The capital is actually Bern, which is only the country's 5th largest city. In all of these cases, it just goes to show you that the largest city in any given country isn't always its capital. In fact, it seems like in most cases, it usually isn't. Number 34. On Mercator projection maps, Greenland appears to be the same size as Africa. In reality, Africa is huge, covering over 11 million square miles of the Earth's surface. In contrast, Greenland is only about as big as the Democratic Republic of the Congo, covering around 830 square miles, or about 2.15 million square kilometers. Number 33. Madagascar and Great Britain appear to be the same size as well, but Madagascar is actually twice the size of Great Britain. Madagascar has a surface area of 228,000 square miles, or just shy of 600,000 square kilometers. Number 32. On maps, Alaska appears huge, about the same size as Brazil and Australia. In reality, Australia is 4 times the size of Alaska, and Brazil is nearly 5 times the size of Alaska. In general, the nature of this cylindrical projection distorts the size of countries as they get closer to the poles. This is why Greenland, Alaska, Europe, Canada, and Antarctica look huge, while Africa, Mexico, and Asia seem tiny. This has led to some criticism against the use of Mercator projections in educational atlases, as critics argue it subconsciously trains students in Western countries to think of America and Europe as more important than countries south of the equator. Number 31. Russia and Turkey are two countries that exist on both Europe and Asia. But despite what you might have heard, they aren't the only countries to exist on two continents at once. There's also Egypt, which is mostly in Africa but partially in Asia, where it shares borders with Palestine and Israel. Many countries that share borders with Russia and Turkey also exist on both Asia and Europe, as many geologists agree that the Caucasus watershed is the border between Europe and Asia. That also means that Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Kazakhstan all cover both continents. Number 30. America's Mississippi River is often called the Mighty Mississippi and is the longest river in North America. However, judging the length of a river isn't always an exact science. So while the Mississippi River is the largest river in North America by volume, it isn't actually the longest. The longest river in North America is in fact the Missouri River, which is longer than the Mighty Mississippi by just a single mile. Number 29. When you picture a desert, you probably imagine sand, hot sun, and maybe some cactuses and a few camels walking around. But what about penguins? Antarctica is considered a desert. Turns out, the only qualifiers for what a desert is are a lack of plants and very low average rainfall. Antarctica has actually only seen 0.4 inches or about a centimeter of rain in the past 30 years. Not only is Antarctica a desert, it's also the world's largest desert, dwarfing the size of Africa's Sahara Desert at 5 million square miles, or about 14 million square kilometers. Number 28. Did you know that the Sahara Desert isn't even the second largest desert on Earth? It actually only ranks number 1 for size if you only count hot deserts. The second largest desert is the Arctic Desert, which covers the island groups of Svalbard, Franz Josef Island, Severnaya Island, and Severnaya Zemlya in the Arctic Ocean. Collectively, it covers an area of 62,300 square miles, or about 161,400 square kilometers. Even though these islands are surrounded by water, they still count as a desert, because like Antarctica, they see very little rainfall and are home to very few plants. Number 27. When you were a kid playing in the backyard, did you ever imagine you were digging a tunnel to China? It's a common fantasy among bored kids with shovels, especially in America, which is China's antipode, a fancy geographical term that refers to 2 points that would be exactly opposite each other on a globe. Well, even if your dad's gardening shovel was strong enough to dig through the Earth's core, you wouldn't find China on the other side. Looking at the latitude and longitude of a few major cities in each country, China's actual opposite is South America, while America's is the Indian Ocean. Number 26. It's a common belief that water always drains counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere and clockwise in the southern hemisphere, a supposed telltale sign you've crossed the equator. This myth is often tied to the Coriolis force, which describes how Earth's rotation affects the path of moving objects. It's the same principle that helps shape weather patterns like cyclones. Because Earth is tilted and rotating, the Coriolis force does vary between the hemispheres, but its effects are only noticeable on a large scale, like in ocean currents or atmospheric systems. But in small amounts, like toilets or sinks, it's practically impossible to notice. So in short, no, the toilets in Australia don't flush the opposite direction. Number 25. Antarctica is the least populated continent on Earth, so a lot of people believe it has no time zones. After all, who would be using them? The penguins? Nah. But actually, technically speaking, Antarctica sits across every single time zone, which does make sense considering the fact that it's a very big continent. While some Antarctic research bases choose to set things to the time zone of their supply country, there are 9 officially recognized time zones on the frozen continent. Number 24. One of the most famous roads in the United States is Route 66, which was established in 1926 and runs from Chicago, Illinois, all the way to Los Angeles, California. It was a vital route for people looking to move west in the Great Depression, and it's been immortalized in movies, TV shows, and pop music for almost as long as it's been around. Most people think of it as the longest highway in America, but its length actually pales in comparison to the I-90, which was built in 1956 and runs from Boston, Massachusetts to Seattle, Washington. We can only guess that more people don't know this fact because, well, get your kicks on I-90 doesn't quite sound as catchy. Number 23. Christopher Columbus is a pretty controversial figure for a lot of reasons. While some Americans today see him as a heroic explorer, in his own time, he was known for abusing his crew members and even beheading his slaves if they disobeyed him. But regardless of what you think the truth about him is, there's one thing we should all be able to agree on. He didn't discover that the Earth was round. While people in Columbus's time still believed the Earth was the center of the solar system, most people understood that the Earth was round. This was common knowledge even as far back as ancient Greece. The idea that people in the Middle Ages thought the world was flat is a misconception that started sometime in the 1800s. Number 22. Australia is a dream vacation for a lot of people, especially for those who love extreme sports. The island nation boasts great beaches for surfing and rocky wilderness perfect for dirt biking and rock climbing. But we bet you didn't know that it's also a great place for skiing. Despite having the nickname of the sunburnt country, it does actually snow in some parts of Australia. It's almost unheard of at sea level, but at higher elevations in places like Tasmania and in the mountains along the country's east coast, snow falls regularly in the winter, which for the southern hemisphere is between June and August. Some years have seen a collective 118 inches 300 centimeters of snowfall. Due to this, skiing is actually a surprisingly popular sport in Australia, and the country has even produced a few Olympic gold medalists in the sport. Number 21. If someone told you that Florida has the longest coastline of any US state, you'd probably believe it, right? After all, almost the whole state is surrounded by water. But you'd be wrong, and you'd be making the same mistake as a lot of people, forgetting about Alaska. Alaska is also surrounded by a whole lot of ocean, and its area is significantly larger than Florida. Florida's coastline is about 1,350 miles, or about 2,200 kilometers long, which is pretty impressive until you hear that Alaska has a coastline that measures over twice that length at 6,640 miles, or 10,680 kilometers. Number 20. Speaking of Florida, it's not the USA's southernmost state either. Well, technically, it was until the United States took over and annexed Hawaii in the 1950s. Key West, Florida might be the southernmost point in the continental US, but Hawaii reaches the 21st latitude. At only 1,460 miles or 2,300 kilometers north of the equator, it's the closest any US territory gets to being in the southern hemisphere. Number 19. Staying within the US, it used to be true that Alaska had the lowest population of any US state, which makes sense given how so much of it is frozen for part of the year and can only be accessed by seaplane. But as recently as 2016, this had changed. It turns out there are two places that people want to live in less than Alaska. Wyoming has the lowest population of any US state, with around 587,000 residents, and Vermont is the second lowest, with a population of 648,000. Alaska, in contrast, has a population of 740,000. Number 18. If you ask most people in the West what country Kashmir is in, they'd probably guess India. The real answer is a little more complicated than that. So complicated, in fact, that there have been wars started over it. Prior to 1820, the region was under Shi rule, but after the First Anglo-Shi War, Kashmir was surrendered to the British, who controlled the area until the partition of India in 1947. Since then, it's been a disputed territory, with China, India, and Pakistan all holding claims to the region. India controls about half of Kashmir, which comprises the provinces of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. These states were formerly one state until they were split in August of 2019. The remaining third of the Kashmir region is controlled by Pakistan, and their section is divided into the provinces of Azad Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan. Number 17. In 1968, the disaster movie Krakatoa East of Java depicted the 1883 Krakatoa eruption, one of the most devastating volcanic eruptions in recorded history. The eruption was 13,000 times more powerful than the bomb dropped in Hiroshima, and was so loud that people heard it thousands of miles away in Alice Springs, Australia. But even though the movie was based on a true story, the title wasn't very accurate. Krakatoa is actually to the west of Java. The film's producers knew that, they just thought east sounded more dramatic. However, the movie was re-released in 1970 as just Volcano, so at least they did their due diligence and removed that crucial bit of misinformation. Number 16. The Matterhorn might be one of Europe's most famous mountains, but it doesn't mean it's the tallest. In fact, the Matterhorn doesn't even rank in the top 10, and it's not even the tallest mountain in the Alps, or even the tallest mountain in Switzerland. The tallest mountain in Europe is Mount Elbrus in Russia, which is over 18,500 feet or 5,600 meters tall. The highest point in the Alps is Mont Blanc at almost 16,800 feet, or about 5,100 meters tall. The tallest mountain in Switzerland is Dufourspitze, standing at nearly 15,200 feet, or about 4,600 meters tall. Number 15. Another great icon that isn't actually quite as iconic as you might have thought is the Golden Gate Bridge. Due to its notoriety, plenty of people believe that it's the longest suspension bridge in the world. While it might have been when it was built in 1937, today it's actually only the 21st longest suspension bridge in the world. The longest suspension bridge on Earth is actually the 1915 Çanakkale Bridge, which goes across the Dardanelles in Turkey. This bridge is over 6,600 feet or 2,000 meters long and was built in 2022. Prior to 2022, suspension bridge was the Akashi Kaikyo Bridge in Japan, which is almost 6,500 feet or just shy of 2,000 meters long. Number 14. You might find it annoying to change the clocks forward and backwards for daylight saving times, but unfortunately, it's just something everyone has to do in the US. Or maybe not everyone. You might have assumed that every state in the US uses daylight savings time, but there are plenty of places that don't. Hawaii, for one example, as well as Arizona. Despite Arizona not recognizing daylight savings, the Navajo Nation, which is partially located in Arizona, does change their clocks. And in Australia, only about half the states recognize daylight savings time, meaning there are parts of the year where two states that are normally in the same time zone are suddenly an hour apart. So if you're ever in Arizona or traveling across state lines in Australia, make sure to double-check all of your bus schedules. Number 13. Most of us are aware that the North Pole isn't a country. But if you had to guess what country is actually the closest to reaching the North Pole, you'd probably guess Norway. Specifically, a lot of people believe that the closest land to the North Pole is the Svalbard archipelago. As a matter of fact, the closest land to the North Pole is actually Kaffeklubben Island on Greenland, and the closest permanent human settlement being the town of Alert on Ellesmere Island, Canada. So if you're planning any visits to Santa this year, those two places would probably be your best starting point. Number 12. From the freezing Arctic to the sweltering desert, here's another fact about the Sahara. The popular perception of the Sahara Desert is one of endless rolling dunes of sand. However, most of the Sahara is made up of rocks, not sand. Sand actually only makes up about 30% of the Sahara, with the remaining 70% being rock and gravel. The terrain of the Sahara is actually surprisingly diverse, made up of a mix of sand dunes, salt flats, gravel plains, plateaus, mountains, and valleys. Goes to show, even the most desolate of environments can hold some surprises. Number 11. The Cape of Good Hope is a rocky headland located on the Atlantic side of the Cape Peninsula in South Africa. It's pretty far south, but contrary to popular belief, it isn't the southernmost point in Africa. This belief comes from another geographical misconception, that the Cape is the dividing point between the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. The southernmost point in Africa is actually 90 miles 150 kilometers east-southeast of the Cape of Good Hope. at a spot called Cape Agulhas. This is also the point where the currents of the Atlantic and Indian Oceans actually meet each other. Number 10. You've probably heard at least one person use the term third world countries to refer to countries in the global south before. And while most people use that phrase to refer to countries that are considered poor and underdeveloped, the term actually has nothing to do with a country's GDP or general quality of life. The terms First World and Third World actually originated during the Cold War. First World countries were the ones aligned with capitalism, and Second World were the ones aligned with communism, with the Third World countries being the ones that weren't affiliated either way. Now that the Cold War is over, we don't really need to talk about Second World countries, but the other two are still sometimes used to this day. Number 9. If you were to play a word association game with different countries around the world, most people would probably associate Somalia with the word pirates. But since 2013, instances of piracy have actually gone down in the ocean around Somalia. It's actually far more likely that you'll encounter pirates in the waters off of Southeast Asia, with the Strait of Malacca being a particular hotspot. Number 8. Did you know that rivers don't always flow north to south? It sounds crazy. If you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Even though we tend to think of north as up and south as down, that's not the case. The force of gravity pushes down from the sky towards the center of the Earth, regardless of where north and south are. And the varying elevations of the Earth's surface means that rivers can flow downhill in any cardinal direction. Plenty of rivers flow south to north, including the Nile, the Rhine, and the Orinoco. Number 7. When you look at a picture of the pyramids of Giza, you probably imagine that they're completely removed from modern civilization. But that's just a misconception fueled by centuries of well-cropped photographs and movies filmed on sound stages. The truth is, if you look at the pyramids from another angle, you'd be able to see that they're actually right next to the city of Cairo. It's relatively easy to visit the pyramids from Cairo, which is why guided tours of these beautiful monuments are so popular with people visiting Egypt from overseas. Sorry to ruin the mystique for you. Number 6. Australia might look like an island, but it technically can't be considered one, because by definition, an island is an unconnected landmass that is smaller than a continent. So, because Australia is a continent as well as a country, it can't be an island. So, the largest island in the world is actually Greenland, which has an area of over 836,000 square miles, or 2.1 million square kilometers. This is much smaller than Australia, which is 2.9 million square miles, or 7.5 million square kilometers in total area. That makes it over twice the size of Greenland. Number 5. Greenland may be an island, but it isn't a country. It's partially autonomous and self-governing, but it's still a constituent territory of the Kingdom of Denmark. Number 4. Mandarin is the most commonly spoken native language on Earth, and because at this point most people worldwide have picked up at least some English from American movies and TV, you might assume that the second most common language is English. It's actually Spanish. Worldwide, it's estimated that 488 million people speak Spanish as a first language, compared to only 400 million native English speakers worldwide. Number 3. If you know one thing about English weather, it's probably that it's miserable. Outside of the UK, people's perception of England is one of cloudy skies, fog, wet pavement, and lots of stuffy businessmen walking around London carrying big umbrellas. But like just about everything you see in movies, you have to take this mental image with a grain of salt. England's major cities actually don't get significantly more rain than other European cities. Paris actually sees more rainfall on average than London. Leeds is the rainiest city in England with about 40 inches, 102 centimeters of rain per year, but it still isn't as wet as Zurich, which gets 41 inches or 105 centimeters of rain per year. Number 2. Americans like to refer to Mexico as being south of the border, but in reality, it would be more accurate to say west of the border. The Texas-Mexico border is actually to the state's west, and it turns out that Mexico isn't actually that far south. 11 U.S. states have land that extends further south than the northern parts of Mexico. And geographically speaking, Mexico is part of the continent of North America, not South America, as many people seem to think. And finally, fact number 1. In terms of geography, Afghanistan is not considered part of the Middle East. While it is a predominantly Muslim country like most of the countries in the Middle East, culturally it has a lot more in common with South Asian countries like India and Nepal than it does with Iraq or Yemen.
Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. Really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on MathPack.